Morning, everybody, again. So today we continue with the mission of the apostles. And as I said yesterday, Matthew calls the 12 people that Jesus chose by name specifically apostles. And he commissions them. But not only does he commission them, in today's gospel reading, you hear how Jesus even gives them the words that they must preach. In fact, the words that they must preach is exactly the words that he himself preached as he began his ministry. So the beginning of the commissioning of the apostles, Jesus gives them these words: the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now, we may not recognize this at the very first reading of the gospel, but as Jesus commissions his disciples, he uses 4 verbs: heal, raise, cleanse, cast. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leper, cast out demons. Where do these 4 verbs come from? From chapter 8 and 9 of Matthew, where he showed how Jesus did exactly that. He cured those who were sick. He raised the dead. He cleansed the lepers. He cast out demons. So now he sends out his apostles with the same words and for the same mission. And then Jesus has this kind of modus operandi of how a disciple should operate in the world. And he has these words: do not take gold or silver or copper for your belts, no sack for the journey, or a second tunic, or sandals, or walking stick. What is Jesus saying? The emphasis is on simplicity. Simplicity. That's the key. Now, from Matthew's context and perspective, more than anything else, the idea is to adapt the life of a traveling missionary. And why a traveling missionary? Because that's the only option people had those days. What I do, or what I will do at the end of this Mass, is Spencer will send me the links for the Mass and I'll put it on my Facebook page. The disciples did not have that option, right? Or I put it on my Twitter page, and the disciples did not have that option. The only option they had was to go about with the oral tradition. The disciple who sent out, the apostle who sent out, Jesus not only gives them the words and the actions to perform, but even the lifestyle that Jesus lived. So really the apostle's life must mirror the life of Jesus as closely as possible. So Matthew is giving us the words, the works, and the lifestyle of a traveling missionary. Now, in today's context, who is a missionary? Now, there are extremes that we can avoid. For example, there are some people who even today will literally follow what Jesus said. And you know what? Hats off to them. Good for them. And then you have the other extreme, and the example I can give you is of a televangelist who just a couple of years back had an interview where he was asking his church to make it possible for him to buy a private jet worth $54 million. And the reason he said that is he needed the private jet is because Jesus said, go to the ends of the world to proclaim the gospel. And he said, if I don't have a jet, I cannot get to other parts of the world. So $54 million, little money for the sake of the gospel. And guess what? His church provided that money for him. I think it's best we avoid extremes. Today, I believe that the emphasis is not so much on the sandals or walking stick, a second tunic or belts or silver or gold, or even a private jet. Who is a missionary? I want to draw from the first reading to describe who a missionary might be today. If that first reading did not touch your heart in some way, please go home and read it again. It's a very, very poignant passage of God speaking to Israel as God's children. When Israel was a child, I loved him. Out of Egypt I called my son. I drew them with human cords, with bands of love. I fostered them like one who raises an infant to the cheek. Have you picked up your own child, or have you picked up a child and held them to your cheek? What a beautiful imagery that is of how God treats us, picks us up, puts us to his cheeks. Yet though I stooped to feed my child, they did not know I was their healer. And here is the key point that I'm trying to connect with. My heart is overwhelmed, my pity is stirred. A missionary is one who has the heart of God. Can you connect with God's heart in that first reading of how God treats their children? God treats God's children. A missionary will connect with that. Just the other day, we heard Matthew describe how Jesus looked at the crowds and he felt that they were like sheep without a shepherd, and his heart was moved with pity. A modern day missionary is one who has the heart of Jesus, the heart of God. Now, in our minds these days, we may think of missionaries who came to us during the colonial times and went into the indigenous people and populations and places, dangerous places, and they preached the gospel. And today we may think of people who go to the Appalachian Mountains, or to Africa, or to South America, or to Asia, or to other continents we may consider either poor or not schooled in the gospel. And all that is good. I think there is a genuine, sincere effort there. So in my practical implication for today, I want us to understand how we can be missionaries today, apostles today, disciples today. So let me begin with what I've already said. The modern day missionary is one who has the heart of God, who has the heart of Jesus. Sometimes missionaries go about to feel good about themselves. And, maybe there is a sincerity there. Some of us go, I remember when I was a young priest, I don't know if I went to places because I wanted to preach the gospel or because I wanted to just feel good about I was doing something. Sometimes missionaries can be, and I'm telling you about my time, where we do it for our sake, not so much for the sake of God or other people. So here is what I think. You got to have a burning love for God and a burning love for others. Jesus loved God with all his heart, and he loved people. In other words, being a missionary is not about yourself. A missionary has a burning love for God and a burning love for others. And you may or may not go somewhere as a missionary. In this sense, we are missionaries 24/7. Today, you might be going to your work, or taking care of your grandkids, or go about daily life. You came to church, you will go away from church. No matter whether you go far or not, whether you stay home or not, the key is, do we have the heart of Jesus? Pope Francis calls this kind of activity missionary discipleship. This is a new concept that he coined. Missionary disciples. See, some people go to mission like they're going to war. I'm going to change the place. That's not missionary discipleship. The missionary disciple does not always go to preach. A missionary disciple goes to discover the God who is already present there. Sometimes we think that we have to take God to people. No, God is already there. God got there before you got there. What are we doing? You're trying to discover the God who is already there. That's the work of a missionary. In that sense, you go with simplicity, with humility. God doesn't follow you, you follow God. A missionary understands that. Remember always that you are not bringing God to some place or somebody. Remember that God is always there, and God is calling you to make that place alive with the presence of God which was already there. There is a give and take in the life of a missionary. A missionary does not always go to give God, but most often, a missionary discovers God already present, and the missionary's life is enriched by God. So you don't only go to give, you also go to receive. I have been to places as a missionary where I learned from people more than I went to preach. A missionary is open to this dynamic process. It's not a one-way street. So listen, sandals or no sandals, gold or silver or private jet, listen, all those things are superficial. What is it that we really want? We want the heart of God. Simplicity, humility, and the heart of Jesus. That's the mark of a missionary disciple. Remember these three things: simplicity, humility, and the heart of Jesus. That's the mark of an apostle, of a disciple, of a missionary disciple. The Jesus who sends us is on this altar. At the end of every Mass, what do we say? Go, this Mass is ended. We are being sent forth. We are being commissioned. And to the extent we are disciples and apostles and missionaries. So go. In simplicity, humility, the heart of Jesus. This heart comes to us in communion. The heart of Jesus comes to us in communion. May we take that presence wherever we go, and may we discover Christ wherever we go. People of God said,